Hey everyone, it's Raymond Wood at the Raymond Wood Podcast. We've got another exciting episode. Now today we've got a guy with us called Jamieson Doyle-Taylor. How are you, Jamieson?
Fantastic, Raymond. How are you?
Very good. Now, I want you to give everyone and all of our listeners, we're going to keep this a bit secretive at the start, but can you give us your job title, who you work for and what the business is you're involved in?
Yeah, so I'm a sports agent and the founder of G2G Sports, which is a sports consulting agency based on the Gold Coast. Accreditation as an AFL player agent with the AFL Players Association, and do player management, coaching and consulting to sports industry through that vehicle.
Amazing. Now, we met, I think it was in December in the Gold Coast. Yeah. We were running an event down there, and I think you reached out before the event and we had a very brief catch up, and it was really interesting that about 6 months prior, we were getting hit with a lot of different things about sports management, about financial advice, about marketing, media. And when I looked at your site, like, you literally tick all the boxes for all this.
Yeah.
One of the big things that we've learned over the past probably 12 months is just to stay in our lane and stay good at what we're good at and not to try and delve off into other areas. So I was really excited when you accepted to come on the podcast, because this is a lot of the stuff we're going to cover in this episode for our listeners. Is we get all these different questions and all around sports agency, contracts, player management. So if it's all right with you, we'll carry on and we'll get a few questions out and see if we can get some good information for the
let's chat about it. Hopefully it's of some value to your listeners.
So in regards to, so you predominantly work in AFL, is there any other codes or sports you do work in as well?
Yeah, covering a range of sports. So representing a Paralympian who'll go to the Olympics in Paris later in the year.
Amazing.
Got some basketball players on the roster, soccer players. Have supported some corporate clients with a test cricketer for the Australian team, Marnus Labuschagne. So I've been involved in a project with a client, client, Beautiful Minds, and that's enabled me to work with Marnus on a project there, and doing some other stuff with some athletes in rugby league and rugby union as well.
Amazing. So it is a real widespread an array of, of talent. So
focus is AFL, but there's other sports that we're covering as well. Yeah,
so it's really good that you covered, and you've got an athlete who's going to be involved in the Olympics. So what do you know? What sport they're involved in?
Yeah, so Ben Hance, he's swimming in the Paralympics in Paris. So he's a gold medalist in his class.
Wow.
From Tokyo. So he'll go over there later in the year to defend that title.
Amazing.
Which is really exciting.
And is he feeling confident going into it?
Yeah, he's pretty confident. He'll go in favourite or close to favourite, and you know, I'd go in with high hopes for him, and you know, he'll be pretty confident going into that.
So, question I want to ask you: have you found a way to get over there to watch him? Have you managed to get a trip to Paris, or have you got to watch it from here?
Well, I've still got until August to work out a way to navigate myself over to there. So we'll see. We'll watch this space.
That sounds really good. Now, some of the different services that you guys offer, and one of the things that we always get asked to us, especially from our players on our professional player pathways, like we want to get an agent, we want to get signed to an agent, we want to get sponsorship, and we're always like more of the premise of let's focus on development, let's get you to being the superstar, and then once you are the superstar, you're going to have a lot of probably agents coming out, a lot of people who want to represent you, a lot of people who want to help you with all these different services.
Yeah.
I've seen a different take on this though, and it was really interesting in the UK, and we're good friends with a couple of sports agents on the grounds in the UK, and they actually really like working with players at the ages of 10 and 11, and they said the reason why they do that is because they like to build a relationship with mum and dad, with the player, and in that way when they become of age and hopefully they've kicked on with the sport, then that relationship's already built, and there's a great level of trust. Do you do anything like that? Do you work with any like younger athletes, or is it only the seniors you work with? Or
yeah, it's a good question. There's some restrictions on the AFL side with the agent regulations in terms of when you can approach players and actually start offering management services to athletes. But with our offering in other sports, we can offer different solutions to support athletes that are coming through as younger competitors, and provide them with services that are equivalent to management services, but we just have to be careful on the AFL side with my accreditation that there's regulations that you need to comply with as an agent in terms of when you can approach athletes, the process that you're going through. But it's interesting that you touch on the relationship with the parents, because that's largely what you're doing, is having that relationship with mum and dad as you're going through the process.
I've seen it in Europe, and there's a lot of countries that have similar regulations, but it didn't always really sit right with me, that, because one of the problems we found in professional football, 9 times out of 10, when players got in trouble, it tends to be the mums and dads who were causing the problems.
Yeah, yeah.
And I found it's more around the education for the parents than the actual players.
Yeah.
And then they obviously then drip feed that down to the players. But I think it needs to be looked at, I think, holistically. I think globally, with all the sports, I think they need to really reconsider that. There's got to be some sort of framework in place where you can engage with the families earlier without all the restrictions, because I think it's needed. And we see it in football, and I see it in tennis. I see it in all the different sports that we've been involved in over the years.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think I appreciate the requirement and the reasoning for it, and they don't want agents there harassing 10-year-old kids when they're trying to just enjoy sport as young kids do. But I think it is important to build those relationships and provide the resources that young athletes need from as early as possible.
Yeah.
If they're aspirational and if they're looking to become high-performance athletes, the sooner you can get them on that journey and helping them with everything in terms of their life support and setup, the better it is, I think, in the long run.
Now, just on some of the services that you guys offer, so when players do come of age and they're old enough to sign with an agent, so just within Australia, if we say AFL, and also maybe we can talk about soccer, what is the age that you're allowed to actually sign and get them to sign with you?
So it would be 17 under the regulations with the AFL Players Association. So you have a process that you go through where you have to approach them. There's a portal that you can lodge your interest in having a conversation with the player, and then it becomes a decision for the player as to whether they're interested in having that discussion with you. Yeah. And then it's basically, once they've accepted your approach, then you can start the conversation. Whether they sign with you then becomes a decision for the athlete once they've had that discussion with you, and whether they feel as though you can support their needs. And that's in terms of helping them with contract negotiations and all the stuff that's associated with their on-field performance, but also with respects to the support that you can provide them off-field in terms of their life setup and helping them for setting themselves up for success in their life after sports. Yeah. And one of the things I think we'll touch on, there's a heap of work under the services that you'd offer, but the first one you touched on is contracts. Yeah. So obviously I take it you guys have to be engaged with like lawyers and stuff, and it has to go backwards and forwards a little bit. Yeah, I am a practicing solicitor, and so that sort of is what started the process of entering into the player management landscape for me. It was how I could align that legal background and experience that I've built over a number of years and applying it to the sporting landscape. So going down the player management path was the most logical way for me to do that at the time. And so I've got legal background and still practicing as a lawyer, and that's a very important part with respects to the contract negotiation and helping with any contracts that you're helping athletes enter into with respects to endorsements or any corporate partnerships and that sort of thing. Yeah. Now, the next one, and the real interesting one, is like things like marketing and media. But if we start talking about media, like when we get into social media, that must be a minefield for you, because obviously I bet you the clubs don't want players to say or do certain things online. Then you're trying to check the player and the brand as well. It must be a tricky one to navigate. Minefield's probably the right word, absolutely. And so you're trying to curate an image for the athlete so that they can portray who they are as a person and exhibit what their values are so that they can attract corporate partners and sponsorships. But then you've got things that you've got to be careful with respect to any corporate partners of leagues and making sure that you're not offending anything with respects to that. Protected partners that the AFL has, for example, you've got to make sure that you're making sure that your athletes aren't supporting products on their social media that are in competition with protected partners of the league and that sort of thing. And then just making sure that the image is suitable for the athlete. So just being really mindful of the type of content that your athletes are putting up there, so that you can make sure that you're portraying the right image for that particular athlete and the brand that they're trying to take to the market. It must be hard, that though, for the players that, like, as an example, if AFL have done a deal with, let's say it's Nike, but then like you've got someone like, say, Reebok's come out and gone, we want to sponsor your player, but then they go, no, because we've already got a deal with Nike. Does it limit you and restrict you with? It doesn't prevent you from doing it. It's just about having the conversations with the AFL and just saying, look, this is what we've been offered, and then you've got to go and have that conversation. more often than not, it'll get ticked off, but it's just a case of you can't just run off and sign anything that's put in front of you. There's restrictions in place and that sort of thing.
Now, with the changes with like social media, now popular it's getting and how big it's getting, and there's a lot of like advertising on social media. Do you have sort of much goings on and dealings with that for the players? Have you seen any sort of like big deals come through over the years for players financially, or?
Well, I think it's name, image, likeness that we're seeing come out of the US with respects to the college athletes, and there's a lot of deals that are coming off the back of that. I think that we'll see filter through into the Australian market in the years to come. And I think that it's about athletes just building that presence, building themselves up and building their brand up and just taking their fans on a journey. So we're seeing a lot of the way that sport's being consumed by Gen Z is very different to perhaps what you and I would have been, getting together to watch our team play. The younger gen now are more interested in the individual athlete, so just taking the fans on a journey with your athlete to then build a community around yourself and then attract those sponsorships and partnerships off the back of that.
Yeah. Nah, we see a lot of it. Like I was probably 4 to 5 years ago, you get a little bit nervous yourself just even delving into social media because it is a bit of a minefield. But then you realise as well, you've got to jump on because if you don't, you're going to get left behind, and everyone's got the device in front of the faces.
And some athletes are quite hesitant to be involved in it. They see it as a distraction. They want to just be concentrating on their sport, and that's got to be their number one focus at the end of the day. But as you quite rightly point out, you've really got to be on there. You've got to have some sort of presence there. It's just about working out what your strategy is, and that's different for each individual athlete, and just having those discussions and figuring out, what's the strategy, what are we trying to do here, and what sort of personal brand are we trying to create for you as an individual athlete.
Now, a real interesting one, it's been quite topical, and we were talking about it off air before as well, but looking at well-being, and obviously it's a big thing at the moment. It's getting more prevalent. I think maybe people are actually coming forward more with mental health issues and battles, and are you finding that it takes up a lot of your time at the moment? Is there a fair bit of it going on, and how do you guys combat it to support your athletes and work with them?
I think it's reflective of society in general. It's an issue that we've got that's across society, and you see that in the sporting industry as a whole. You're in a high-performance environment in professional sport, so there's a lot of pressure on these athletes from their clubs. There's a lot of pressure for the individual athletes perhaps to retain spots on rosters. They might have corporate partners that have expectations of them in terms of turning up for events and these sorts of things, and that creates a lot of pressure from a mental health perspective for athletes, and it's just about providing the resources. It's not necessarily for me to provide the solution for the athlete, but being able to direct them to the people who can help them, depending on what situation they're presenting with. And if they come to me and say, look, I'm experiencing this, it can be for me to guide them to this particular resource or to this particular organisation that might be able to help.
Yeah, I think as well, there's a lot, there's obviously, I've seen it in the game, you get a lot of athletes who you think are okay as well, and you discover there's stuff going on in the background. And we've had a couple of really confronting ones, me being a dad of 2 girls. We had a few female athletes many years ago on one of the projects we were working on, and there was a lot of self-harming going on, and it was like we weren't really aware of it until it was raised to us. And then, like, for most people, you think why they were self-harming was such a small thing. They probably shouldn't have been doing it, but you realise they don't know how to communicate. They didn't have anyone to talk to, and it was their way of communicating. It was really upsetting and confronting to see, but also it was what was really clever, where I was based and working at the time, they actually employed a chaplain and like a minister, and he was phenomenal. And within the space of 6 months, once they knew they had someone to talk to in a private setting, it stopped. It was unbelievable, because we went from like maybe 10 to 11 athletes. We had a program of about 100 players self-harming regularly. And then within 6 months, it literally stopped because... And I think that showed to me the importance of young ones being aware that there is someone there they can talk to, and if they're not aware.
And sometimes that's all it is just knowing that you've got someone who you can talk to. They might find it confronting to talk to their coach or to talk to their teammates because they're all there under pressure to achieve, and they've got to show up, and they've got a lot of expectation on them to achieve results, but knowing that they've got someone there that they can go and talk to in a confidential way can be something that can be really life-changing for people that are in that situation.
It was funny. I realised how naive and sort of uneducated I was with it all a few years ago, and I just couldn't understand like why they weren't like speaking up to the coaches and stuff. And then the way this chaplain explained it, he'd done a workshop with us and all the coaches and the staff. And he said, you've got to imagine, he said, if this young one goes up to the coach and explains they've got problems, they're not going to be in the team. That's what they perceive. Yep. And I realised how naive I was, and I didn't really think about it properly. And then you're like, oh, wow, and it shows you what goes through the head. And how much is going on and how busy it can get in there because they're under pressure from the coach, from mum and dad, the agents. It's like there's a lot of pressure in there. So in regards to well-being, do you guys have like a dedicated team, or is it something that you're trained up on, or is it like a resource you can point them to online, or how do you guys work with that?
I've got experience myself with respects to dealing with mental health and supporting people with respects to that, from having coached and been involved in it in that way. But it's about identifying what the situation is with the individual athlete and making an assessment. Is there something that I can support or assist this person with? Do I need to escalate it? Can I direct them to a resource that's going to be a better resource based on what my understanding of the situation is? And then just steering them in the right direction. So helping them if I can, and I feel as though it's within my capabilities. Otherwise, making sure that I can guide that athlete in the right direction.
Amazing. Now we're just about to go to our first ad break, and when we come back, me and Jamieson are going to talk about a particular topic that I'm super passionate about. But guys, just enjoy the ad break, get yourselves a quick drink, and we'll be back with you in the next 60 seconds.
Would you one day like to be a professional football player? Would you like to be part of our pro player pathway? What is the pro player pathway? It's an opportunity for all Australian football players aged between 10 and 23 who want to join us to become the next professional football player. On the Pro Player Pathway, you get to join me and my team free of charge to an event all around Australia. When you join me, we're going to teach you the secrets of football in Europe. And one day, maybe, you could be gracing the Champions League final. Guys, over the next 12 months, we're going to be coming around all the major cities of Australia. And when we come around all the major cities, we're going to be running our free events everywhere we go. So guys, what have you got to lose? Nothing. It's a free event. It's for boys and girls aged 10 to 23. And I'm going to teach you the secrets of becoming a top European football player. Oh, and one final thing. We're going to be giving away 20 scholarships to join me on this program of a lifetime.
Hi everyone, it's Raymond Wood at the Raymond Wood Podcast. We're here with Jamieson Doyle-Taylor from G2G, and we are about to carry on and pick up where we left off from the first part. Now, Jamieson, a really one that's close to me, and I've seen a lot of this in professional footballers' life after sport. And I think in the 90s, mid-90s, the Premier League kicked off, and football in England went from probably, if I'm honest, it was maybe semi-professional compared to what it is now, the levels that it's at. A lot of money come into the game, and working in the Premier League for teams like Liverpool, Leicester City, there was a lot of ex-players who had big careers in the 90s, 2000s. We used to live in a lifestyle where they're probably earning £30,000-40,000 a week, and then the career stops. And it was quite confronting and upsetting to see 5 or 6 of your idols who've now bankrupt, 3 divorces, 4 kids, lost everything, and I think it was down to the fact that there was just no planning for life after sport. Now, I was really interested because that was a big piece on your website, and it was so pleasing to see that that's something that you guys do and think about. You're not just there to maybe just, work with the player while they're successful and then that's it. So can you talk a little bit about what you do and how you get involved in that and how you prepare players?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that's really important, I think, from an agent perspective, is to have conversations with your athletes about what their life after sport looks like as early as you can. I think historically you've seen in the AFL where there's been players that have played and they've earned a reasonable income playing, and then they get to the end of their career and it becomes a afterthought, and it's like, what do I do now? Where do I go? And so that's where we are looking now to support athletes in terms of having a conversation. All right, there's an inbuilt redundancy with respects to your playing career, whether you become the next Dustin Martin or whether you get delisted after 2 or 3 seasons. There's going to be a point in time where you're not playing anymore. So what does your life look like after your playing days are finished? Do you want to go and be doing a trade? Do you want to be studying so that you can go and pursue a professional career afterwards once you finish playing? Do you want to go into media? Do you want to stay in the sporting landscape? Whatever it is, but it's around having that conversation with the athlete and then putting plans in place so that when they finish playing, they're ready to transition into whatever it is for them in life after sport. And then with respects to that, it's about managing your income and what you're doing while you're playing so that when your playing days are finished and you might be on a decent income while you're playing sport, that might not be the same when you stop playing. So making sure that you're setting yourself up financially and you've got good things in place so that you can transition as smoothly as possible.
Yeah, I think the key one, I think you said it was plan, having a plan in place, and it was quite scary on how many players didn't have a plan, and it was evident. And to see them driving into the training ground, being an academy coach, driving a 15-year-old beat-up car, and like, how can you've been earning millions of pounds and now you... And it was really upsetting to see how people can come off the edge of a cliff.
Because there's lifestyle trappings for athletes as well, and so they're earning the good income, but it's getting spent on things that are not going to set them up for success once they stop playing, and then all of a sudden the income dries up, and then there's nothing there, and you haven't planned in terms of investing or setting yourself up financially. You haven't put a plan in place in terms of what you're going to do once you've finished playing sport, and then that day inevitably comes, and I say inevitably because there's that inbuilt redundancy in a sporting career. Then you're left in that situation. What do I do now? Where do I go? And you might be someone who's been in the bright lights of the sporting landscape, and then all of a sudden you're out working in the coffee shop, and it's a fall from grace, and it can be tough psychologically for athletes, as well as financially and otherwise. It's
tricky, and because I think we were speaking to one of the players a few years ago, and I think they were earning £45,000 a week when they were at the height of the contract. So I suppose they used to live in the lifestyle based on that amount of money. But as you say, once that stops, they want to keep living that lifestyle, but that money's not coming in.
And then you've got some athletes who overcommit themselves with respects to borrowings and things like that. So they take on these big mortgages and whatever because they haven't been advised properly, and then they get cut from the roster or they get injured, and then their salary drops and they've got themselves overcommitted, and that creates problems for them as well. So that's the importance of having good advisors around you and just people helping to set you up strategically for success off the field.
Yeah. It was quite funny. There was a question a few years ago, and it was, can you name like the top 5 richest footballers on the planet? And everyone's like thinking, it's going to be Ronaldo and it's going to be Messi. But like one of the richest footballers on the planet's actually a guy from Liverpool, where I'm from, and his name's Robbie Fowler. And Robbie was, I think, very fortunate that when he was younger, the agent that he got understood financial planning. And his area of expertise was in the finances. And he started investing half of his salary every week in purchasing a property. And by the end of his career, I think he finished up with a portfolio of in excess of like 400 properties. Now, also, they were to the point when we talk about planning. They'd done a bit of research, and I think it was in the late 90s, and they researched and they knew the Commonwealth Games were going to be coming to Manchester, I think in 2006, which is now Manchester City Stadium. And they actually pretty much bought up all those properties that were in a derelict area, but they knew there was going to be regeneration and money spent. So talk about planning a masterstroke was unbelievable. And from what I've been told, and it's he earns hundreds of millions from it. And I went to an entrepreneur sort of an event a couple of years ago, and it was really interesting that something that we all get told in society, and everyone thinks owning a house is great and it's a great investment, but then the way this guy laid it out, he said, if you think owning a house and having a mortgage is an investment, stand over that side of the room. And if you don't, stand that side. And everyone's gone that way. And he's like, one guy gone that way, and I'm like, oh, what an idiot this guy is. And in the way the guy explained it, and he laid it all out, and he said, firstly, straight away, he said, unless that house is actually physically making you money every week, it's a liability.
Yes.
He said, it's costing you money, it's not making you money. That's what you're talking about, borrowing too much.
Yep.
And then he goes, and the example he gave was, he said, the best thing to do is, he said, is live in a rented place.
Yep.
He said, but have 10 investment properties.
Yeah.
He said, and get all the mortgages on interest only.
Yeah.
He said, so the interest only repayment might be $200 a week. He said, but you're getting $600 rent. He said, you're $400 cash rich on every property.
Yep.
He said, so if you got 10, you're $4,000 cash rich a week.
Sure.
You can live on that.
Yeah.
And I sort of looked at that premise and I went, why don't they tell us this?
Yeah.
And it's like, and it was amazing.
They're not teaching you that in school.
They don't teach it in school.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is why it's quite controversial, but I'm really against the school system because it doesn't teach kids the basics. And this is something as basic as I understood that premise in 1 minute, and I think I was 40 years of age. And I'm like, why would you have a mortgage, and why would you pay the mortgage back fully? Because you're going to be stuck to that debt for 25 years.
Yeah.
And then he gave the example. He said, if you've got these 10 properties and you're only ever paying the interest down, he said, but in 25 years' time, they're going to be worth at least 4 to 5 times what you pay for them.
Yep.
So you've still got the money to pay the bank back in 25 years, and you're going to have residual 80% maybe you'll make on the property. And you've also been cash rich for $4,000 a week. And I'm like, why don't we teach this at school? And then
different way of seeing things. And this is like an education piece for athletes as well. It's not about just doing these things for athletes, but it's about educating them so that they can see that there's a different way of doing things. And then they can become investors. They can be interested in their own portfolio and whatever they're building and developing for themselves outside of their sport.
And then when he explained it, and he's like, so when you see that you're making $400 a week, is it an asset or a liability? And then you go, well, it's an asset.
Yeah.
And that was like that 10-minute conversation. And I'm thinking, if I was about that conversation
20 years ago,
I bought my first property at 20, and I always done really well. I had a good job. I had 2 cars, but I was mortgaged up to the hilt at the age of 20. I had bank loans, credit cards, and it was like, if someone would have just told me this, I probably would be 10, 15 properties better off. Yeah. And it's just, it's scary. So from a life after sport for you guys in regards to financial planning and helping players, is that something that you do, or do you bring in some experts to help and assist? Or
it's bringing in experts so I can facilitate the discussion and talk generally about it, but I'm not a financial advisor, so it's about me putting the right people around the athlete so that they get the right advice. So I've got the legal background. I can give the legal advice that supports that, but it's about getting the right financial advisors and just getting them talking to the athletes as early as possible so that they can set themselves up with things like what we've just talked about.
What I'd really love to mention, you might have read it as well, but the guy who was giving the seminar, he actually spoke about where he got it all from, the ideas, and it was from a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is Richard Kiyosaki. Yeah. And I read that book, and I've read it 3 times over, and it was unbelievable. It just blew my mind. It makes you think so different, and I'm thinking, this book should be the education system. Yes. This is what we should be teaching our kids. Why aren't we?
But I think that's what they want to get people to just be, let's go and get a mortgage, let's live this sort of life and be the slave to the bank for 20 years. But let's teach these kids, these athletes, that there's a different way of doing things and get them to embark on a different path. And it's just about opening up their perspective.
And then another one that was scary, he spoke about the fact that mortgage brokers and that, they're on super fantastic bonuses if they sell you a mortgage where you're paying your payments back every month. But if you dare go for an interest only, they don't get any sort of bonus.
They don't want to know about it.
No wonder they're pushing that.
That's right.
Being deaf for the rest of your life.
That's right.
But I think it's pulling it back into sports, AFL and football and all the different codes. I think it's really, really important. What was refreshing to see is that I've met loads of people who do this work and work in the sports agency in Australia over the past 18 years. And I think you're only one of 2 websites and people I've met who actually cover all of this stuff. What's really upsetting to me is you just see it's so super uber focused on, they just want the elite player. They want to make the 10% every month on them, and they don't do any of this stuff. So I think for me and our listeners and anyone who's watching on, you need to do your research. It's important, isn't it, that you get the right person behind you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not to say that I'll be doing everything for the athlete, but it's about leveraging my network and being able to utilise me to put the right people in front of you so that you can get the right advice and the right strategic advice so that you can set yourself up for success.
Now, looking a little bit more, they were like some of the services we've covered that you guys offer, which is phenomenal. The next one, again, I was even more impressed with because, like, it's close to me being a coach as well, is player management.
Yep.
And the big one I'm really intrigued to ask you about, because I didn't get a chance last time to chat with you over it, but it's like you've got one-on-one coaching on there.
Yeah.
So can you explain a bit of that, how that works? Is that just within the AFL industry you do that, or is it? And what is the one-on-one coaching on a field with them? Are you in a classroom? Or
No. It's a service that I'll offer to people who want to just invest themselves to figure out what they need to do to set themselves up for high performance on and off the field. So it's a consultative approach where I'll sit there and ask really powerful questions of the athlete or whoever is presenting to me, and then figuring out a solution for them based on the responses, and then giving them the power and the autonomy to drive their own success based on where the conversation and the discussion leads.
And for that one-on-one coaching, obviously, if they're under 18, I'll take it with mum and dad.
Yeah.
Do you work with all athletes in all ages with this one-on-one coaching, or is it just specific ages?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, with younger athletes, it's going to need the parents' involvement and input from the parents for that discussion to happen, and it's important to have the parents involved when you're dealing with younger athletes. But it can be from anyone, as young as you like, to someone who's an aspiring athlete who's of age, and it's just around having the discussion with the parents when they're sort of under 18, and then if you're old enough, we can just deal directly with the athlete.
It was funny when I met you. It's like a lot of people, like I share my stuff, and a lot of my like family and friends over the years have gone, Ray, you share too much because that guy's directly in line with what you do. And I'm like, no, because like what you got to understand is collaborating. There's enough work for everyone, and everyone offers something slightly different. Yeah. And it's like, I'm a big fan of collaborating and sharing stuff and talking about things. And I think what you've discovered is exactly what I think I discovered, is that coming from like both of us from a coaching background, but then also, you know, you've got your legal aspect, but then you've got the agents up here, but there's a huge white space in the middle. Yep. And when I looked at your website, I'm like, he gets it. Like you're that white space in the middle. Yep. And it's linking from being a player with coaches, pulling them into that white space and then eventually getting them to that top end. Yeah. And is that how you designed and you set up the company? That was the idea in my mind when it starts out, and every business or company, as you know, starts out with an idea, and it just, you know, you plant the seed and water it and see where it ultimately leads to. But that was the thinking behind it. What do you do if someone is starting out on their sporting journey? So that's the grassroots, someone who's just really on the beginning of their journey, and then getting to the ultimate success. And so there's a lot of moving pieces, as you know. It's not just a case of here I am, I've signed up for my junior club and now I'm playing in the Premier League, or I'm on the big stage for the AFL Grand Final or the Olympics or whatever it may be. There's a lot of things that have to happen in order for an athlete to get there. And there's a lot of people that need to help someone. You know, you see someone up on stage receiving their gold medal or their Premiership Cup or whatever it is. There's a lot of people that have helped them to get to that point. Yeah. I play my role, you play your role. But I think the collaboration is really important, because you're going to struggle to achieve the ultimate success on your own. Yeah, there's a lot of hands helping you along the way, isn't there? And it's I think a lot of people throw it, I think, individual sports like golf and tennis and say, you know, oh, Tiger Woods, he's done it all on his own, you know, but he hasn't. Like, he's had a team of people constantly behind him his whole life. You look at Max Verstappen in the F1 at the moment, and the amount of people that are behind him, and he's dominant, he's winning every race just about, but you see the amount of hands and people behind his success. It's extraordinary. It is. It's phenomenal. Now, the next one, and this was a really good one before we go to our next ad break, and I want to ask you if you can give me one example, but it was around powerful strategies for individual success. Yep. I'm I think you seeing in the room when you come in and seeing our events, our program is built on 7 pillars.
Yep.
And there's 7 pillars to get success. And I liken them to that like powerful strategy. I loved that when I read that on your website. Can you give us an example of maybe one of the powerful strategies that you guys utilize to help success for the players?
Yeah, I think visualization is a really powerful strategy to help with success. And so sitting down and just really, really vividly experiencing what your success looks like for you. And so what success looks like for Raymond is different to what success looks like for Jamieson, is different to what success looks like for the young emerging athlete, but just getting really clear in your head as to what that is looking like for you, and down to the minute details of what that looks like, and then trying to really experience that from a visualization point of view before you actually go out and then experience it.
So that visualization, is that something like that you would do in a classroom setting, and you take them through scenarios, or are you on the field, or is it a mix? Or
it could be a mix, yeah.
Okay.
It depends on the circumstance and whatever the environment is with the athlete that you're working with, but it's just a really powerful strategy, I think can lead to some significant results. I'm sure you would agree.
I love it. You would have seen the project that I worked on, the Triple P in the Premier League, and of that £1.6 billion that was spent, one of the key areas that we utilised with the players was visualisation, and even down to like players weren't getting success in a certain area of the game. Let's say, for example, it was juggling the ball.
Yeah.
And we'd sit them down and we'd get them to visualise for just 1 minute.
Yep.
And in their head, they're just thinking over and over again, just juggling the ball without ever making a mistake.
Yeah.
Blew my mind. I was like, what the? Like, this is unreal.
Yeah.
Like, kids who couldn't get past, say, 14 would visualise sitting on the ground for 1 minute, eyes closed, and then they'd knock 28 out.
Yeah.
And then we started to realise that, like, we'd see players, and it's where our coaching went to another level, where, again, you see in my room, where we do the one-on-one individualised coaching.
Yeah.
And you get, say, a striker, boy or girl, and they'd be great at getting in a position, they'd receive the ball great, but when they got in that 1v1 situation with the goalkeeper, they couldn't finish to save their lives. Yeah. But we started to get educated that rather than, and I admit when I was young, you'd look at them players and go, oh, he's rubbish, he can't score to save his life.
Yeah.
But then you realise that you actually have to look at the fact that they were able to create space, find a space.
Yeah. It's just the finishing.
Yeah.
Touch.
Receive the ball. Take the next bit. They've got all of it right. They're just missing the final part.
Yeah.
And then visualisation come in.
Yeah.
So then what we'd do is we discovered that when we were doing shooting drills, or we'd do what was called positional specific work, so we're only working with, say, the defenders or the attackers.
Yeah.
We'd visualise with them for a minute.
Yeah.
And then in that situation, 1v1, and the only thing we ever gave them was just 2 areas to strike the ball low and hard in either corner.
Yeah.
And then once we cleared that in the minds, again, it was all down to that visualization, which is one of your, the powerful strategies.
Yeah.
Out of your powerful strategies that you use, though, is there one in particular that you really love, that you've seen the biggest success? Is it the visualization, or is there another one?
I think the visualization is really powerful. You see it, it's similar in AFL. You have real psychological issues sometimes for athletes with respects to goal kicking. And just visualising, what that looks like. It's very similar to what you just described with the soccer player, taking shots on goal. For an AFL player, there can be a player who's really good field kick and would hit the target pretty consistently in general play, but then when the pressure of taking a shot at goal comes into it, all of a sudden it becomes a different thing. But it's the same skill. They're still able to execute a 30, 40-metre kick pretty effectively, and just starting to visualise, what does it look like? What does it feel like when I've actually kicked that goal? And then all of a sudden you're seeing the percentage or the strike rate increase, sometimes significantly, just off a...
And it's not just like 1%, is it? It's like you notice it. Like I've just said there, like we've seen players like who were achieving like say 50, 5 juggles or 10, and then they double the score. It was crazy, the results, and I think it was psychologists and psychiatrists that were involved in the project, and it was all around clearing the mind.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily just because you were visualising. It was the fact that when you're visualising, you can only think of one thing.
Yeah.
And once you cleared the clutter, that's why you're given success. And it's like with our programme, you would have seen the objectives that we give the kids. So when they go on the pitch, they're not listening to dad yelling, do this, do that. They're not listening to the coach do this. And there's 6 million things in the head. They're going on to focus on pass completion.
One thing.
Yeah, and it's like in AFL.
Yeah.
Pass completion would be the same.
Can
you get it from A to B? Can I get it from me to Jamieson? Yeah, great. No, I didn't. And that's all you focus on.
Yeah. And, when you're dealing with high quality players, majority of them can hit that target from this sort of distance. There's not an issue with them being able to do that. So it's just about getting into that mindset of just, this is what I'm thinking about. I'm not listening to the opposition player yelling and screaming or what the coach said or what I had for breakfast or what I've got to do after the game. I'm just thinking about this, and then the next thing will be the next thing. But that's all I've got to worry about.
Yeah, as you go along. I'm loving this, but we've got to go to our next ad break. But guys, big thank you for listening in. We'll be back in the next 60 seconds. Grab yourselves a drink, go to the bathroom, and we're going to get back for the final part with Jamieson.
Hey everyone, we are coming around every major city in Australia over the next 12 months. We have got free objective football testing going on, guys. It's for boys and girls aged 10 all the way through to 18 years of age. The objective testing is quite simple. We'll put you through our 6 tests and it'll give you your results: physical, technical and tactical. And also, we're going to choose 16 winners to join us on an all expenses paid trip to Europe in 2024 and also 2025. Guys, what have you got to lose? Nothing. It's free to sign up. You get free objective testing and you'll get a free feedback, and maybe you'll be joining me at the Santiago Bernabeu in 2024 or 25.
Hi everyone, it's Raymond Wood back for our final part with Jamieson Doyle-Taylor. Now, Jamieson, conversations have been good. I think my mission when I go in a room and I speak at an event or I platform speak around the world, I always like to just try and teach everyone at least one thing. I think in this podcast, I think our listeners have learned like 10 things. It's amazing. The next thing I want to speak to you about, and this is something that's really close to my heart at the moment, I think I've just told you off here that I've just been to Bali, to Indonesia, I was with me and 9 others, guests from all around the world. We had people from Dublin, we had people from India, people from the USA, people from the Ukraine, and I met some of the most amazing people. And I thought we had problems within business, and then I told you off here that we were very fortunate. We had a beautiful lady from the Ukraine on our retreat, and she's involved with the war efforts that's going on with the Ukraine and Russia at the moment and raising funding and awareness. Now, the whole retreat was around discovering your purpose in life and why you're here. And again, I couldn't believe it when I was looking across your website the other week that one of your subtitles is clarity of purpose. Yep. So can you explain a little bit how you come across that and how you implement it for the players? And
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's such an important thing and it's often a work in process, identifying what your purpose is. And sometimes you've got to remove things that you think are relevant that perhaps aren't so relevant once you start digging deeper. But each athlete will be different with respects to what their purpose is and what they're placed on this earth to do. But it's just about trying to identify that so that then you can live in accordance with whatever your purpose is. So asking yourself those questions, having those discussions with mastermind type groups like what you've just done in Bali, and then that can reveal to you some things that might not have been in your awareness prior to that enable you to live more aligned with what your purpose is.
Yeah, it's an interesting one that when I went into the retreat, like you think you know what you're doing is the direction you want to go in, and sometimes, as I said, sometimes you actually have to do a complete U-turn, unlearn everything, and then relearn everything and go down a different route.
Absolutely.
And I think we've seen our biggest success with our programs over the past couple of years since we realigned our purpose and we actually had a proper purpose. And our mission every day is to go out, and if we can help one player just get up to the next ring of the ladder where they need to be, then that's our job done. Yep. We're getting a lot more success stories than just that at the moment, but that's our most pleasing thing, that we're able to show mums and dads and players there's a pathway. Yep. And there is really good people out there who've been there and done it and got the T-shirt and know which way you need to go. So when we talk about, obviously, clarity of purpose, again, I think this drills back into probably to the parents, but it must be tricky when you're having to deal with the young ones, especially any 12, 13-year-olds. It's probably, again, is it more the focus you drill listen to the parents and then hope they educate the kids?
Yeah, I think primarily you're having the discussion with the parents when you're dealing with someone at that age. Yeah. Obviously you'll have some interaction with the player, but you're really relying on the parent to pass on that information and have those discussions with their child. And you provide the tools and the information and everything that's in your toolkit and then you're relying on the parents to go and have those discussions separately. And it's around having the support and the consistency of the message, I think, as well for the athlete. So, if the athlete's talking to me, you want me to be saying the same thing to them as what the parent's saying to them, as what the coach is saying to them, because it can be overwhelming sometimes for athletes, because you've got the coach saying one thing and you've got mum and dad who think something else, and you've got the agent over here who's suggesting that they should be doing this, and it's like, who do I listen to? That's why you've got to know what your purpose is, and then take on board what's relevant for you and your purpose, and make sure you've got people who have your best interests at heart around you. Sometimes you might have some conflicting information there, but just take what you need that aligns with your purpose, and then lift yourself up with that.
Off you go. I think I like in that. One of the lessons I learned was I was working at Leicester City, who've just got promoted back to the Premier League. So congratulations to everyone at Leicester. I'm so excited to see them back in there. But they're what I would call a very quiet leader, but the head of football, the head of the academy at the time was John Rudkin, and he's now the head of football at the club.
Yeah.
And he'd just drip feed little bits every now and again. Very clever, very quiet. Yeah. I got really intrigued with him because he was a very quiet guy, but you knew when he said something, it meant something. Yeah. And he said the best thing we can always do at the club, and one of the values he instilled in me, and I carried it into Euro football star and the professional player pathway, was that if we're ever struggling to make a decision on anything in the club, whether it's we buy gluten-free bread as well as wholemeal bread, or we're going to buy a particular type of ball for the players, he said the only question we should be asking ourselves, does it benefit the players or not? He said, and if you always ask that question, you'll always get your answer.
There you go. It's simple, isn't it?
It's that simple and it's that powerful. And then, as you know, I worked in the US, I worked in Australia, and I love Australia, and even though I've got the accent, I'm an Australian citizen, but some of the political rubbish I see going on at clubland in football, my daughter's involved in tennis.
It's across sports.
I bet it goes in AFL. It's like, can we not just all have that mission statement?
Yeah.
If it's not in the interest of the player, we don't do it. And there's your answer for everything. Yeah. But something so simple gets confused all the time.
It can become overly complicated unnecessarily. I've been quite involved at clubland in AFL for most of my life. I've been involved in some way or another, and it can be very difficult just to get something as simple as, what balls do we want for the players ticked off on. And there's frustrations there sometimes, because all you want to be doing is what's best for the players. So it should just be as simple as that, but for some reason it's not.
I think from the outside looking in now, I think one of the big things, I think I told you, my daughter last year is a professional tennis player now, but she'd done a year of AFL. She loved it. And the one thing that I loved about AFL was how easy it was to just pick up the phone, reach out to a club. It was like, it was $300 for the whole season. But then when we got there, we went, because she's a girl, we got this program in place, it's free. And I'm like, what? Yeah. And I'm like, this is unheard of, because like in England, football's free. Yeah. And the higher you get, the more free it is, like the benefits you get. But here, we pay for everything through the nose. But I think the model that the AFL have got is amazing. And it's, again, we just spoke about John Rudkin at Leicester City and having a very simple rule on how we make decisions. I just don't get why other sports aren't looking at AFL and going, can we come and actually learn how you're doing this? And I'm sure they'd share, because it's just going to help kids in general in Australia. And isn't that our purpose? It's just to bring the next generation through better.
That's ultimately what it's got to be. That's what we're all here to do, is to just impart knowledge and bring up the next gen and help them to be as good as they can possibly be as athletes and as people.
Yeah. I think, just to finish off on that one with the AFL, why do you believe they've got it so right at the juniors and with the costings, and it is pretty much inexpensive? Is it from the top down, or is it just a good structure, or are they well financially backed? Or
I think the AFL are very good business operators, and so that gets invested back into their Auskick programs and the support at the grassroots with the really young kids. And there's a pretty heavy investment into women's footy as well now, so you're seeing a lot of initiatives around that too. And so that's something that I think that the AFL is very good as a business operator. So they run it quite commercially well, and they're perhaps more savvy commercially than other codes. But that would be the lesson from that would be to invest in it from the ground up. because that's where your talent's going to come from in 10, 20 years' time. And so if you're making it an enjoyable experience for all of the stakeholders, make it as easy as possible for the parents, make it as enjoyable and fun as possible for the kids, make it as rewarding as you can for volunteers. And there's a huge volunteer network within the AFL landscape as well that really helps that to thrive. So that's something that's really important to recognise as well, I think, that really helps the AFL model is the willingness of volunteers to come in at club level and support things.
Yeah. I think in football it's a real touchy one, and I'm quite outspoken on it, and I think sometimes culturally this volunteer system we've got in Australia, I think if it's done right, it's amazing.
If it's done right.
But it's not done right in football. And I'll give you an example, and you may or may not be aware, but we'll have volunteers come in football, and they'll volunteer to help out on game day. They'll be stewards at the game. Fantastic. Cooking a sausage chisel, great.
Yeah.
But where it crosses the line for me is then when you've got volunteers who are presidents of clubs, vice presidents, head of football, and we're like, you've got volunteers making decisions, really. And this is where I think, for me, AFL's got it right. They've understand the business and the volunteer, and they understand the difference, the split. And I'll give you a quick example. I spoke to a club many years ago, and I tried to encourage them to bring this bid writer in. I said, but he's going to cost you $60,000 a year.
Sure.
But it's going to be money well spent. It's an investment. It's an asset.
Yes.
Because he's going to enable you to bring millions into the club. They didn't take it up on it. They said it was a waste of money. We can't. But then they wouldn't think twice about spending $100K on a lawnmower that they didn't need, because the council mowed the lawns anyway. Because some guy wanted this big fancy dancy lawnmower at the club, he went and purchased it, and it was like, this bid writer then left and went to another club.
Got the results.
Got the results. And this club's one of the biggest clubs in Australia now. And he's bringing millions of dollars in funding and sponsorship. And I think, for me, looking from the outside, and I think that's where AFL get it right. They understand the difference where volunteers are useful in certain parts in the club or the sport. But there comes a point where you need paid staff members to drive the results.
Agree.
And I think that's where we go wrong. And I think that's where we've got to try and fix in football.
Yeah.
Probably one of the last couple of ones before we finish off, and thanks for your time today, but there's around mindset and positive mindset. Again, it was like some of the stuff I read on your website, it was like reading from the manual from the English FA when I was on the project, and it's like, is he copied and pasted all this? And I'm like, no, because I've met a lot of people over the years, and they've, like you said, you start with one thing and you go out with the right intentions and a good purpose, and all of a sudden it flowers. And so talk to me a little bit about building a positive mindset, and what does that look like for you, and how do you put in those processes to enable success for the players?
Yeah, sure. I think in a sporting environment, you're always going to be confronted with adversity, and it's about having that mindset that you're going to learn from the adversity. There's going to be successes and enjoying those along the way. So it's about celebrating the small wins. But when you are in a sporting environment, and in particular a high-performance environment, there's going to be a lot of setbacks and a lot of learnings along the way. So it's about, how do I respond and how do I handle the situations where I'm confronted with adversity, whether that's not performing as well as you might have liked on a particular weekend, whether that's you've been confronted with an injury situation that means you're going to miss a big game or a big trial or something like that. Having strategies in place to handle those situations, and having those strategies in place before you get to that point, so that when that happens, if that happens, because those things may or may not eventuate, but just having plans in place so that you can respond in a positive way to situations as they present themselves, because it's never a straight line to success. There's always going to be hurdles and obstacles to overcome, and just having a mindset that enables you to overcome challenges as they present themselves to you.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. And again, I think you've said it about 5 or 6 times, and we say this to our players, like what we discovered on this project, there was no secret magic recipe.
No, there really isn't.
Just like planning.
Yeah.
You know, we spoke about having a purpose, and if you're leading off from a plan and it's clear and concise, 9 times out of 10 you're gonna get the success.
Yeah.
I think as well, in society nowadays, a lot of people live in fear, and they don't want to believe it is as simple as just take one step at a time
and let the path reveal itself. You've got to take those first tentative steps. Yeah. And one thing I say quite often is that every marathon run starts with the first steps.
Yeah.
So you look at that and it's 42 Ks down the road. Goodness me, how am I ever going to get there? But you've got to take the first step before you can get to the 42K mark every single time you start out on that journey.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. And I think as well, we spoke about it a lot, but I think it's around educating. One of the big things we've discovered is educating our parents.
Yeah.
So we've got people who follow us who are customers. We've got people who aren't customers. But one of the big things we're trying to do now is the podcasts.
Yep.
We've got a YouTube channel, and it's about educating people that we've got all this information and resource out there. We bring amazing people like yourself on, and all different people from this elite area of the game who come from different corners to educate them. And that's our mission. We're just trying to upskill and educate and to take people out of that fear base, because they do get burned by one person and then they go, well, everyone's the same.
Never again.
Never again.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's, I think I seen it was like a YouTube clip a few nights ago, and it was like, you've got to just liken it to babies. Like, they've got no fear, but you got to remember, a baby just doesn't get born and just starts running.
That's right.
They've got a million things to do to get to that point, and I think we lose that as adults sometimes.
Yeah.
And I have to sometimes look in the mirror myself and go, right, get out of this. Like, you need to get back in the positive mindset. And
it applies equally. I take my own medicine. It's like sometimes you can get down on a situation or something that's happened, and it's just like, hang on, how can I reframe this so that I can approach it in a different way?
Yeah, you've got to. So for you guys, for G2G, now obviously I know you deal a lot with athletes in Australia, but you're saying that, you got players going over to the Olympics. Do you work externally with players overseas, or is that something you can do? Because we've got a huge reach of players everywhere.
Yeah, of course, something that we can do. So we've got some basketball players that we're supporting, including Quan Four, who's a former NCAA player in the US, who's looking to get back into sort of top level basketball, and we're supporting him on that journey. So we're supporting athletes on the management side internationally. Domestic focus, given that's where I am and that's where I'm operating primarily, but certainly have the capability to support athletes abroad if there's anyone interested in having a discussion. Always open to that.
Yeah, amazing. And what's the future look like for you guys at G2G? What's the plans for the rest of the year? And
so it's just about supporting the athletes that we've got and just helping them to live out their purpose and taking them on the path that they're on, and doing everything in our power to make sure that the right resources and the right support is around those athletes, and then just attracting more athletes into our stable so that we can support and help as many people improve their lives using sport as a vehicle, but improving their lives not only in an athletic perspective, but also in terms of what they're doing off the field, as we've touched on earlier in the episode.
Amazing. So if anyone wants to reach out to you, obviously we'll put some of your information in the show notes as well, but how can they reach out to you? What's the best way?
Yeah, best way to get in contact, you've got the website, www.g2gsports.com.au. You'll find there a contact form, or you can contact me by email, or happy to take phone calls if that's preferable for people.
Amazing. And then obviously I've spoke to you before off here, we have our monthly Zoom meetings for all of our athletes on the pro player pathway. Exciting news. It looks like we've got Jamieson who's going to join us on one of those future episodes. So I think it'll be July. So watch this space. So a big thank you for me at the Raymond Wood podcast, and thank you, Jamieson, for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me on. I hope it's useful for the guys listening at home and girls, and look forward to seeing some success for you and everything that you're doing in the year ahead.
Amazing. So everyone who's watching, this is only possible if you are subscribing and commenting. We thank everyone who watches, but to keep this going and to keep the podcast going, we need everyone just to subscribe, comment, and remember, ask any questions to me or Jamieson on this podcast, and we'll get them sent across, and I'm sure Jamieson will be happy to answer any questions that we get put.
Yeah, absolutely. Fire away.
Brilliant. So a big thank you from me and everyone, and we will see you on our next episode at the Raymond Wood podcast.